All right, guys, I'm back today for the rest day with Coach JD Cannon. And today we're going to give you guys a rundown of all the events that have occurred. I have this Reddit mega thread up highlighting all the key points, and then we're just going to give our viewpoints. And we're really going to focus on Magnus today and how he's impacted this whole situation. So, JD, how closely have you been kind of following this whole situation?
I mean, it's hard not to follow it. It's everywhere. Like the number of like support tickets and stuff we're getting from people about Magnus and Hans is enormous. Like it's insane. Like so many people think that like chess.com has taken some action against Hans as a result of this, which of course we're not involved in any way. So like it's just impossible not to follow.
Yeah. And this has been like since the weekend, this is like all I've been interested in is like, what's the latest news? So let's start from the very beginning. September 4th, Hans Niemann defeats Magnus Carlsen with the black pieces, which is just like an insane accomplishment for any chess player. And Hans crosses over the 2,700 barrier for the first time.
Yeah.
19 years old, he's
Yeah, I didn't
2,700.
realize how young he was. Like I thought that he had been around a minute because like I've heard about him for several years, but I didn't realize how young he must have been when I first started hearing about him.
Probably like 12. Like I remember he was in the US chess school and he like beat Greg Shahade in some blitz game and that YouTube video went viral. I'll have to
Yeah.
find it after this, but it was like insane. He's just like a little superstar.
I think the first time I really came to know him was because when we did the Puzzle Battle Championships, like he was a major contender in that. And I remember he gave some pretty frank interviews where he was talking about that, like the people who are really good at these puzzle battles are people who have literally just memorized hundreds of the top level puzzles where they don't actually solve them, they just have them flat memorized. And I remember thinking that that's when I first heard of Hans.
Yeah. And so what happened then after Hans defeated Magnus, um, it was requested by an anti-cheating arbiter, David Segwig, that a 15-minute broadcast delay would be implemented in the next day's round. So this would be for round number 4. So what they did in the first 3 rounds is they just had a live broadcast. Pretty
Yeah.
much whatever you saw was live. And then that same morning, Magnus Carlsen tweeted out, "I've withdrawn from the tournament. I've always enjoyed playing at the St. Louis Chess Club and hope to be back in the future." What are your thoughts on that? You've been to the St. Louis Club many times. It's not too far from you.
No, it's really not too far from me. I I just have a hard time understanding why he would withdraw. Like there are a couple of different accusations against Hans, but like even if we said they're both true, like why withdraw from the tournament? Like what's the point? Like he's already played Hans. So like if he has some problem with Hans, he's not going to play him again. So
This,
but go ahead.
yeah, this is the start of all the problems. It was a very vague tweet, and he's not telling us what he's thinking.
And I mean, I think like a lot of people assume that Magnus wouldn't do this without a lot of justification. And not just because he's the world champion, but partially because it affects his reputation, if especially if he's making some sort of false non-accusations. But like this decision cost him probably a lot of money. I have to imagine he's forfeiting appearance fees. He's forfeiting the ability to win a prize. He's probably, I assume that his travel was covered to come play, and he maybe has to reimburse that. I mean, but we're talking about like he's foregoing more than a year's salary for me by this decision to withdraw. So like, and I can't imagine he arrived at that decision lightly. Now, my year's salary for him is like it doesn't mean as much to him as it does to me, but like it just seems like that he's giving up a lot of money by having withdrawn from the tournament.
And one thing I think he could have considered, and this happened, I believe, in the Toiletgate scandal back in 2006, Kramnik Topalov,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
Topalov accused Kramnik of possibly using a chess engine in the bathroom.
yeah.
I believe Topalov forfeited one game, had some time to think about it. They made some adjustments, and he came back and continued the match. That's something Magnus could have done because withdrawing, just outright withdrawing from a round robin, really screws things up, whether there's money on the line or not. And making a vague statement really just threw Hans under the bus. Because what if the case was that Magnus feels one of his teammates somehow intentionally or unintentionally leaked his prep and he's mad about that? This whole thing would have never turned on Hans if he would have said that. Like, hey guys, my prep got leaked. I don't know how, but I'm not going to play in the rest of the event. I don't want months of work prepping for this all to just go down the drain.
The other side effect of this is the people who already played Magnus are effectively playing an extra game versus everybody else who hasn't yet played Magnus, who isn't going to have to. And some people who lost to Magnus now have that result voided.
Yeah.
And so like their standings goes up. And but like they still have that fatigue of that extra game that they got to play where everybody else is going to get like an additional rest day that the people who already played Magnus are not going to get.
And Fabiano has 5 blacks and 3 whites. Like that's a
Yeah.
discrepancy of 2 games in a round robin. That's not good either. I mean, that
No, no,
affects
that's
people's money.
I definitely. Although there's an argument to be had that like not having to play Magnus is like you're gonna have a better event score by not having to play Magnus.
That's
Like
possible. Yeah, that is possible.
with
Um,
either color. Like
so then continuing on with the timeline, that was one thing, right? Magnus withdraws. There's a lot of like talk, what happened, what happened. Normally, if that would have just happened and no other big figures jump in, we would just be left to speculate, right? But then
yeah.
Hikaru Nakamura comes into play and he just went on a rant on his Twitch stream. And in the beginning, he's like, I'm not going to talk about it. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. And he's slowly just trickling out more and more accusations. And essentially, what he said was there was a 6 month period where Hans did not play for any money tournaments on chess.com. Quote, that's all I'm going to say. Close quote. And that fired off all the accusations. So, him saying that plus other comments throughout the day on his stream, all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, Magnus quit because Hans is a cheater. What do you think
Do you
about
think that
that?
well, it sounds like maybe you're somewhat suggesting that Hikaru might be just as culpable as Magnus.
Yeah, I think it's the combination of the two.
It's
So now,
definitely the case that Magnus has been more, or Hikaru has been more vocal than Magnus, because that I've seen, there really hasn't been a lot of communication from the Magnus camp.
and I think other players haven't really taken a step back and said, let's wait for Magnus to clarify, right? If you were Magnus, wouldn't you want to kind of step in and say, hey, Hikaru, I'm not saying that he cheated in this game. I'm just saying something went on with my prep if that was the case. Because by being silent, that makes it look like he agrees with Hikaru. And he's either like planning something legally or planning some big statement later where he actually comes out and said, hey, I think Hans is cheating in the Sinquefield Cup.
I have an alternative explanation for why he hasn't commented on anything Hikaru said,
What's that?
and he doesn't watch Hikaru's stream.
Or he wants Hikaru to take the flack.
I mean, could it possibly be the case that Magnus isn't that interested in what Hikaru has to say?
It's very possible. Yeah, it's very possible. And then other top players have been weighing in. Um, Wesley So joined in. He essentially said like he lost a lot of sleep over this. All the players have been talking about it. Nepomniachtchi gave that post-game interview. He said that Hans's game was, quote, more than impressive, close quote, which sort of implies like maybe there was something fishy going on in that
I think
game.
maybe we're stretching there. People have speculated on what his facial expressions and body language, and
Yeah,
honestly,
he kind of went,
I don't buy all that. I think people will see what they want to see in that, and like, I mean, that phrase "beyond impressive" has been applied to a lot of situations when they just mean it's really impressive. Like that's not that expression. I don't think we can. I don't think we can know what Jan's beliefs are based on that interview.
you're used to hearing beyond impressive. Is that what you're saying? People
It's
telling you.
beyond impressive is no longer beyond impressive as an idiom for me.
Yeah. And then Levon comes out, and he defends Hans. You know, he's very personable guy, Aronian is, and he kind of
Baroni's a
just,
super nice guy. Also, probably have no idea what he really thinks.
yeah, that's true. But he kind of just said, like, you know, top players are paranoid. So when you kind of start to add up these statements, you do get the impression that a bunch of high level players have been suspicious of Hans for a while. So we won't go through all of these statements, but some players are saying, you know, I don't see any details, like Jan Gustafsson, Rafael Lieto analyzed the games, didn't see anything suspicious. Nigel Short even kind of backed up Hans by saying, you know, this was a transposition to a game that Magnus played. So we're kind of getting all of these takes from super GMs. And then the big bombshell yesterday, after his draw against Lanier, Hans Niemann gets into the post game interview, talks about chess. After the chess talk, he goes on a 30-minute, I don't know what the word is. It's not a rant, but like a 30-minute passionate explanation.
Diatribe.
What is it?
Diatribe.
I don't even know what that is.
It's a fancier word for rant.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but did you hear? Did you watch the any of that 30-minute
No, I
interview?
actually haven't seen that yet.
So what he did is he responded to the accusations that he has a fake accent. He said
Uh-huh.
he's been kind of living out of a suitcase for the last 2 years, traveling around tournaments, hasn't been in the U.S. And he says he doesn't really socialize with anybody because he studies chess 12 hours a day and like eats 2 meals a day, either like Uber Eats or just goes and gets carry out. And essentially, that's his life. So he's saying like I don't even talk to people in English much, and when I do, a lot of times English isn't their first language. So he said his accent's all over the place.
I will say I lived abroad in Europe for a year, and I had two Finnish roommates and one British roommate. And when I came back to the US after a year, I sounded weird and people made fun of me because I did not sound like I did prior to that year. Now it faded away and now I sound normal again, but I had a noticeable change in the way that I spoke after spending a year abroad.
I believe that. I knew someone who moved to London for a year, and they were speaking with a British accent after 12 months. Not consistently, but certain phrases I would be like, oh, that sounded really British, just like out of the blue, you know, like ending things in a question and stuff like that. So yeah,
Yeah,
it makes sense.
I find that totally plausible that if you're spending time abroad and you're not talking to native speakers a lot, that your dialogue and the way you speak and inflections and tones and phrasing, that those will change. I find that entirely plausible.
So now Hikaru feels like he's getting blamed for this, which he rightfully so. I mean, he was the one who jumped in. He had 20,000 viewers most of his stream, and the main St. Louis broadcast is getting like less than 10,000 viewers, adding up
Yeah.
YouTube and Twitch, right? So everyone's watching Hikaru talk about this. He's gaining like a ton of subscribers as he's talking about it, right? Like everyone loves drama. I mean, even we're
Yeah.
covering this with additional detail because a lot of people want to hear what's going on. But do you feel Hikaru should be getting some blame here too?
Uh yes, but no. I mean, like I say yes just because like I think obviously he's possibly or somewhat responsible for what he says, but I say no because like he's not the only person that let's assume he's wrong. And let's assume that everything he said is factually inaccurate and he just made a bunch of stuff up. That's not I don't see why I have to people do that all the time in everyday conversation with they're talking to their coworkers, their friends, their family, people gossip and they spread rumors and blah blah blah. He just happened to let's assume that that's what he was doing that in front of an audience. And I don't know why he should be held to a higher level of culpability than anybody else. So I don't really think that he, even if we assume he's just making stuff up, which I can't say we are, but even if we assume that, I don't care. Like I don't see what the problem is necessarily. Okay, that seems not. I mean, it has implications on Hans's career possibly though, but maybe not though because like I don't know that like because the implication of his career is he's maybe not going to get invited to these prestigious events in the future. And I would like to believe that the people who are inviting to these events would take that into account, that like a lot of this is just because of something people, it's just the rumor mill and whatnot.
Well, if like let's say half of the top players start to not play in any event if Hans is invited, that's got to affect the organizers, right? Like, why would you want to invite Hans if half the elite players don't want to come?
Well, we'll cross that bridge if it happens. But I mean, I can't imagine elite players. Most of them are don't really have sponsorship deals, and these events are like how they make a living.
That's true.
And so like I would I would be surprised. Like I don't think most of the elite players have the luxury to withdraw from a tournament because it's their payday.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so do you think Magnus should come out and make a statement? Because I feel very strongly that Magnus needs to come out and say something. He needs to let us know, is this a Hans allegation with more details to come? Is it an allegation that his prep was stolen? Because that's completely different. Or was he just salty, got a little upset, caught up in the moment, and didn't have enough time to think about it? Because no one's really good at making rational decisions when they're caught up in the heat of the moment. He just lost that game and he didn't even give it 24 hours before he said, "Hey, I'm out of here."
I I mean I can't speak to what his state of mind is. Like whether he was upset or frustrated or maybe
I
just
mean,
didn't
we
feel
know
like
he's
playing.
passionate. He's a passionate guy. He storms out of
And
some games, won't do interviews sometimes. It's
yeah,
not
yeah. I
out
mean,
of the realm of possibility. It's not like Fabiano just withdrew and we don't know if he was upset. Fabiano's never been
no.
upset in his life.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's true.
All right, JD. So, what would you do if you were Magnus in this situation?
Okay. So it's hard to say what he's like morally obligated to do because like that's a really difficult question, but I can answer like what I would want to do. And okay, so if it were me and something that I had said or done was like being misconstrued publicly to the detriment of another person, I would definitely feel compelled to want to clarify that. Like I would want to clarify it. Now, if I said something vague and people picked up on the right train of thought, I maybe wouldn't feel compelled to say anything because people are kind of doing my dirtier work for me.
Yeah.
So, but I can't say. I mean, it's possible. I mean, another explanation is that I mean, Magnus said something, people are misconstruing it, and he's like, if I say anything else, that's just going to add fuel to the fire, and it's best just to stay quiet and let it blow over. And then that's the best way to deal with the situation. And I think there's probably some merit to that perspective, though, that like maybe he like me and my feeling of where I need to clarify. Maybe Magnus is taking the more mature route and saying, you know what? Maybe I said something I didn't need to say. Maybe I behaved in a way I shouldn't behave, but I know that my actions carry tremendous weight. And if I were to say or do anything more, that it could end up worse than it is now. And I
Yeah.
think I think, I don't know if that is his perspective, but I think that that's a potentially reasonable perspective that he might have.
Yeah, that's very true. I was trying to make an analogy to, how would this feel in another sport? So like you have your Race Rivers shirt on. What if the world champion paddler lost to you in like a qualifying match or something, right? With a big audience and they just withdrew from the whole event. Would you feel, and people thought that you cheated against them? They thought that, oh, maybe JD had a little motor in his back pocket and put it in the water behind him and just started puttering away. Would you feel like, hey, that world champion needs to come out and say, JD didn't cheat, guys. Maybe JD admitted to cheating in a bike race when he was 12 years old and 16 years old, but he did not cheat in this paddling race.
I like from Hans's point of view, I would want everyone important in the world to say I didn't do it.
Hmm.
Like obviously, I would want that. Like so from his perspective, it's clear what he would want. Like I can't imagine that he would want people to remain silent or and he definitely doesn't want people to remain saying bad things. So I totally think from his perspective he would want Magnus and Hikaru and anyone else who's ever said anything negative.
All
He
say
would
he's
want,
clean.
yeah, he would want everyone to say that. I mean, but even if he's not clean, he still wants them to say that. Like,
Well, because
so
to
like,
me, the problem is this whole thing doesn't start if Magnus doesn't send that tweet, right? If he just withdraws and doesn't give any reason, you would assume that he's sick. You wouldn't assume that Hans cheated, or you would assume that maybe he's just upset, right? So he kind of went the other route and said, I don't want anyone to assume that I'm sick. Like there were multiple statements, even almost like unnaturally, where it's like, oh, we know Magnus isn't sick. What do you think of him withdrawing? Right? Like that was how they phrased the question to some of these players. Who was it who said, I think it was MVL, was like, oh, maybe he was sick. You know, what do you think of Magnus withdrawing? Oh, maybe he had COVID or whatever. He was sick. And they were like, no, he's not sick. And then they just like went on to spill the beans, right? Like they knew he didn't withdraw because he was sick.
I mean, I suspect that we don't really know the full reason why he withdrew, and I'm not sure that he has an obligation to tell us. But I don't know. It's tricky. I find I've had too many ethics and morality classes. I mean, this stupid philosophy degree and my subjective ethics beliefs, but it's it, I I suspect we don't know everything, and everybody's just speculating. And and my belief is that in the long run, probably we'll all forget that this happened, and it'll be like, because nobody cares about Topolov Kramnik.
Yeah.
Like nobody cares, and like it doesn't seem to have. I mean, Topolov's still getting invited to turn, or for a long period of time. Maybe not anymore, but not wasn't even that long ago. Topolov was at Sinquefield, so like it didn't seem to affect his career that much. And I think to say that like this is going to be, if we assume that Hans is actually innocent, which I don't think anybody can prove otherwise at this point. I don't think it'll have such a long lasting, like, I mean, maybe it'll cause problems for a bit, but I think in the long run, people are going to forget about it and it's not going to be a thing.
That's a really good point. And that was even a direct accusation, right? This isn't even a direct accusation. It's more of just this pie in the sky. Like we don't really know what Magnus was thinking. And yeah, we're in this world now where things come and go even faster than they did 15 years ago. So
Yeah.
yeah, people will probably forget about this next month. So
Until the next controversy happens. And then,
exactly.
like, I mean, like, everybody was talking about Magnus abdicating his throne. Now he's withdrawing from tournaments. Like, kind of wonder what the next thing is going to be, actually. Like,
Yeah, I'm interested too.
is he going to try to reset his rating and start over from the beginning and do like a real life speed run?
Yeah,
That would be amazing.
FIDE resets Magnus's rating.
Yeah.
That'd be great. All right, so let us know. We'll wrap up our discussion here. Let us know in the comments. What do you guys think? Are we owed anything from Magnus? Should Magnus come out and say something? Should Hikaru say anything? Uh, Drop that in the comments below. All right, thanks,
I'll just
JD.
say on record, they don't have to say anything if they don't want to.
Yeah, if they want to stay silent, that's fine. All right, see you guys.
Yeah.